welcome to the first session of Building the Beloved Community Public Safety Working Session. We are recording this working session, and we will be posting it to our webpage, which I will be sharing here in just a moment. It will take me a day or two to get this video edited and posted on that webpage. You can review this session. You can utilize this session with your faith community in your conversations with the faith community. We have 29 registered houses of worship, which we are super excited to have. Our goal was 50. And so we hope to add another 10 to 20 churches and synagogues, mosques, and temples in the next coming weeks as well. So welcome again. I want to take this moment just to talk about today's session and introduce myself, which I realized I didn't do. My name is Sarah Paterka. I'm the Director of Opportunity St. Paul and Congregational Engagement and Interfaith Action. Along with my colleagues, Phil Romine and Randy Ross, I want to welcome you to this first working session. Today, we'll be hearing from Commissioner Harrington and the first dilemma story that we'll be working through today. We'll also be watching a video that Commissioner Harrington put together with his team at Department of Public Safety that will help highlight and educate us on the dilemma. So this session is an example of what the session you're going to be doing in your house of worship between now and March. So again, we're going to hear the dilemma. We're going to talk about the dilemma. We're going to answer the question about what values are conflicting in this dilemma. We're going to have a text study led by Professor Earl Schwartz, who will also be leading us in a little grounding session about what the nature of our work is. But during the text study, we'll be seeing, do our values change? Does our opinion change about the dilemma? Have that discussion again about the dilemma, always centering, going back to this dilemma story that we're going to hear about this morning. We're going to ask that your learning coordinators and your facilitators report back to us in a Google form that'll be on our website, which again, I will share with you in just a moment. And so this is kind of your beginning, your practice run with us and other faith leaders from our community in what we ask that you do in your congregations, in your faith community or house of worship. Today, in this working session, we'll also be using Mentimeter. You received a link to go to menti.com. I did receive a couple emails asking, well, what's our code? Your code will be shared and the link will be shared in the chat when it comes to that time. This will just be a way in which we can share with a large group our thoughts and feelings back together in an anonymous way, in a way in which all 45 of us can talk together while we share our thoughts and feelings on these questions. So it's a way in which we can just share quickly our thoughts to the questions that we are being asked. My last piece of housekeeping is use the chat for any questions. Phil and I will keep monitoring the chat for any technical issues. Please also, under the reactions button underneath on your Zoom toolbar, there is a raise your hand feature. We have 44 people currently on. Using the raise your hand feature is super easy for us because you go to the top of our screen. And so we'll know that if you have a burning question that you need to ask, that'll be helpful to us. So please use that raise your hand tool. And if you have another technical question, feel free to private message myself or Phil Romine, and we will be able to answer those questions. But now it's my pleasure and honor to introduce Interfaith Action of Greater St. Paul's Executive Director, Randy Ross, who will take it from here.
Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to see you. What a great group. And I know the group's just going to be growing as time goes on. This video will be shared with houses of worship that are very interested but couldn't be here today, and we'll snowball from there. Wonderful to see you. It's my great pleasure to introduce my friend, colleague, and teacher, Professor Earl Schwartz. Professor Schwartz recently retired from the Hamline University religion faculty. He's the author of numerous books and articles on Jewish education, moral development, literature, and history. His most recent book is The Ark of the Covenant, Jewish Educational Success on the Upper Mississippi, a study of Jewish communal education in St. Paul. Professor Schwartz built and for many years taught in the social justice major at Hamline University. He's a deeply interested student of the civil rights movement and has engaged civil rights leaders nationally to teach with him in the Twin Cities many times, much to our enrichment. He and Commissioner Harrington taught together years ago in a program focused on the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's letter from the Birmingham jail. Professor Schwartz designs the curriculum for interfaith text study in Interfaith Action's Opportunity St. Paul program and frequently teaches there, building for all of us the habits of mind of deep thinking about how to bring faith to life. Professor Schwartz.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you for those kind words, and good morning, everyone. In the next few months, we're planning to explore a sequence of moral dilemmas together. Dilemma stories, because we're committed to thinking deeply and broadly, and dilemmas defy quick and easy answers, calling us instead to think and then to think again about questions and doubts that we might otherwise try to put to rest with big words like, oh, it's justice, or it's rights. The educational purpose of posing a moral dilemma is then to help us move from attitude to careful reflection. And that's where our work together begins. But we're going to be exploring these dilemmas in groups. And so we're going to be sharing what our personal experience and judgment tell us about the issues raised by these stories with others, and listening carefully to what others tell us in return. But then, because the groups in which we discuss the dilemmas are congregations, communities of faith, we're also going to include voices from our sacred traditions in our conversations with one another. Commissioner Harrington, I'm sure, hears from many sorts of groups, but the commissioner has commissioned us because, as members of congregations, we're intentional community seekers. Community here and now, and community across the ages. And then, having listened to our own best judgment, the judgment of our fellow congregants, and voices from our respective traditions, we hope ultimately to arrive at helpful contributions to the Department of Public Safety's ongoing process of self-evaluation and its pursuit of equitable policies and procedures. Welcome and thank you.
Thank you, Earl. I appreciate that introduction. It's my pleasure to introduce Commissioner Harrington and the video that we're going to see after we hear the dilemma story. Commissioner Harrington was appointed by Governor Tim Walz in January of 2019 to the Minnesota Department of Public Safety. His pathway to this role prepared him well for his work. In 1977, Harrington began at the St. Paul Police Department as a patrol officer. Working his way up the chain of command, he was selected Chief of Police in 2004 and served in that role until 2010. Commissioner Harrington then served as Minnesota State Senator for the East Side of St. Paul from 2010 to 2012. Just before his appointment as Commissioner, Harrington served as Metro Transit Chief of Police for the Twin Cities area, overseeing a significant growth to the agency and increasing diversity in the department from 5% to 50%. Commissioner Harrington has also been on the faculty at Metro State, St. Mary's University, and the University of St. Thomas, where he's taught leadership, demographics, community-oriented policing, and gangs. Harrington is founding member of the Asian American and Black Police Officers Association. He helped launch and is a board chair at Ujamaa Place, a nonprofit agency that works with African American men to transition them out of prisons and gangs to become productive members of community. Commissioner Harrington was born and raised in Chicago, a near and dear place to Randy's heart. He received his bachelor's degree from Dartmouth University and master's from University of St. Thomas. He is a father of 5 adult children and a grandpa to 16. Commissioner Harrington has created a video for us to see after we hear the dilemma story. And it has 4 parts, introducing us to the traffic enforcement. This video he has embedded is presented by the Lino Lakes Police Department about the procedure of a traffic stop. That's the second part of this part of the video. Thirdly, we'll hear from an additional video about how race-based traffic stops play a role in our community. And then we'll hear a couple questions about the dilemma story that we'll discuss. I'll turn it over to Commissioner Harrington to share our first dilemma story with you, and then we'll see the video. Commissioner Harrington.
Thank you, Sarah. As I often would say to you, you can cut about half of that stuff out and I would be just fine. So the one piece that never gets mentioned that I think actually brought Earl and I together is that my baccalaureate degree was in Far Eastern religions, which is perhaps not the most typical subject matter for a up-and-coming police officer or police chief. So I'm delighted to be here with you today. This is a long journey for us to get here together. And I want to echo Earl and Randy in your comments that this is really all about community. Community needs to drive public safety. Community needs to drive good policy and procedure. And one of the things that we're trying to do at the Department of Public Safety is to try and reach out to community to hear your voices more directly. It is all too typical that that state offices can become very insular and they can become very inwardly focused on the budget and things. And what we are really very deliberately trying to do is to say, no, public safety is a public good, and we need to work with the public to determine the direction of public safety. And especially at this time where there are many, many voices voicing concerns about public safety in both the public sphere of legislators, but also in the media. So I'm going to start with the dilemma, though, as I was asked. The dilemma, quite simply, is this. Officer Johnson has been working patrol for 5 years. She is assigned to uniform patrol and has an area that includes an elementary school and a high school and some residential and commercial properties in her area. After roll call, she leaves the station, is driving patrol, working the afternoon shift. And she sees a car slow down, but fail to stop completely for a stop sign. Johnson turns on her lights and pulls in behind the car, but the car does not pull over immediately, and in fact appears to speed up a bit. Johnson turns on her siren to signal the driver of the car that she's been following to pull over now. And as the car does pull over, Officer Johnson notices the car has no rear plate and that the brake lights don't seem to be working. There are 3 young people in the car that are talking animatedly as the car pulls over. Officer Johnson checks out on traffic using the radio, and radios in the car's description and her location, which is our standard practice. The dispatcher reports that a car with that description has been reported stolen recently and had been seen near the school parking lot. Officer Johnson is told that the car has been taken from a home and that the owner said she was warming it up with the keys inside, and that she had left her purse on the seat and also left in the car a 9-month-old golden doodle puppy that she was taking to the vet. Officer Johnson is walking up to the car, and she sees a young male driver and asks him for his license, registration, and insurance information. And the driver gives her several documents, asks why he was pulled over. As Officer Johnson begins to look at the documents, the front passenger door starts to open. What should Officer Johnson do now?
Should we go to the video?
Yes, please do.
Okay. Yep. One moment. Technical difficulty. Here we go.
My name is John Harrington. I'm the Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Public Safety. And I want to thank Interfaith Action and our partners, the churches, the mosques, and the synagogues, who are joining together as we begin a beloved community conversation. As I was thinking about the beloved community, I was thinking about what makes up the beloved community, and one of those pieces is the whole issue of traffic enforcement. Traffic enforcement is getting a lot of conversation these days, and so as I thought about traffic enforcement in the beloved community, I thought back to what was and what is the primary goal of traffic law enforcement. Traffic law enforcement has three primary goals: prevent and reduce the number of traffic accidents, promote sustained compliance with traffic laws through deterrence, and to prevent hazardous traffic situations from occurring. In short, we want to reduce crashes, deaths, and injuries on Minnesota roads by improving driver behavior. Nationally, cars killed 42,000 people in 2020. That's up from 39,000 in 2019, according to the National Safety Council. But according to the FBI, last year there were 21,570 murders, up 29% from 16,669 in 2019. That's the highest annual total since 1995. Now, I want you to know that I recognize the number of victims in both of these categories, whether fatal crashes or murders, is far too high. But the number of crash victims, I want you to think about, is more than double the number of homicide victims. Cars last year killed 23% more Black Americans and 11% more Native Americans than they did in 2019. That's compared to a 4% increase in fatalities for white Americans. You should know that Minnesota wasn't any better than the national average. If anything, we're seeing even greater loss of life. With our preliminary numbers, and these are preliminary, in 2021, we saw 196 homicides. And we saw 497 fatal crashes. I assume that you, like me, have been in a car. That seems like a pretty safe assumption. And that you may have been stopped by the police. I have been stopped by the police on a number of occasions, whether it was as a young kid driving in Chicago, or out on the highways going back and forth to college, or even later on when I became a cop. To help you understand how it's supposed to be done, please watch this instructional video done by the Lino Lakes Police Chief, John Swenson, and then Captain, now Chief, Kelly McCarthy.
Hello, I am Chief John Swenson with the Lino Lakes Police Department. Many times we get questions regarding traffic stops and the steps that officers take while performing them. In this video, Captain Kelly McCarthy will walk you through the process officers follow when making a traffic stop.
Hello, I'm Captain Kelly McCarthy, and I oversee the Patrol Division of the Lino Lakes Police Department. I'm here today to go into a little more detail about the traffic stop procedure. Once an officer has the legal authority to make a traffic stop, several things have to occur before he or she activates their lights. The officer runs the information from your license plate through the state computer. It's a very important safety step, and it allows us to find out as much as we can before stopping that vehicle. Several people have expressed concern or asked, why did it take so long for the officer to pull me over after activating their lights? The state computer system is statewide, and sometimes it takes longer for that information to come back. So that could be part of the delay from when you first notice the officer behind you to when they turn on their lights. In addition to running the license plate information through the state computer, officers must inform our dispatch center that they are making that traffic stop.
162 Henry Tom Paul, 700 block, Town Center Parkway.
Because our dispatch center dispatches officers throughout Anoka County, there's often radio traffic that doesn't allow the officer to get on the air right away. After the officer has run the plate and informed dispatch of the traffic stop, he or she will then activate their emergency lights. While officers are always looking for the safest place to stop the car, it is the driver of the car being pulled over that ultimately decides when and where they stop. After the vehicle has stopped, the officer will approach the driver, introduce themselves, and ask for their driver's license and proof of insurance.
Hello, Officer Closer with Lionel Lakes Police. Do you have your driver's license?
Yes, sir.
And your proof of insurance too, please.
Oh, okay.
The driver will also be informed of the reason for the stop.
The reason for the stop today is the speed. You're going 47 and a 35.
Oh, sorry.
Any reason for the speed?
You know, I'm late for work.
Okay.
The officer will then take the information back to the squad, verify it all, and either issue a citation or a warning. If the stop occurs at night, the officer will use their lights to limit the driver's vision to the rear. While we understand that this can be annoying, it provides the officer with a tactical advantage that is necessary for the safety of everybody involved.
Hello, I'm Officer Owens. Do you have your driver's license, please?
If you are stopped by an officer, here are some things to remember. Once signaled by an officer to stop, do so at the safest place in the safest manner as possible. This can mean pulling over as far to the right as practical or out of the main traffic lane. Turn your radio off and roll down your window. To people on the interior of a quiet car, it may seem as if the officer is speaking louder than needed. This is not intentional on the officer's part, just a byproduct of the increased noise level on the outside of the vehicle. Keep your hands visible when possible and keep your license and proof of insurance in a location that is easy for you to access. Avoid reaching under seats or into glove compartments unless you have advised the officer that you're going to do so. Some people have expressed fear and concern that the officer pulling them over might not be a real officer and might in fact be a police impersonator. While these situations are very, very rare, we understand that the possibility is frightening. For the most part, LLPD officers will be in uniform and in a marked squad car when conducting traffic enforcement. There are occasions where officers in plain clothes and in unmarked squad cars will make stops. You must stop when signaled to do so, but if you are unsure if the person you are talking to is a real police officer, ask for their police ID. If you are still unsure, advise the officer that you are scared and you want to verify that they are, in fact, a police officer. You may then use your phone to call our dispatch center or 911. Advise them that you've been pulled over and that you want to verify that the person pulling you over is, in fact, a Lionel Lakes police officer. At the completion of the stop, the officer will provide you their name and badge number if requested to do so. The Lionel Lakes Police Department is committed to non-biased policing and respect for all citizens. Most Lionel Lakes squads are equipped with audio and video recording devices, and your interaction may be recorded. Should you decide that you also want to record the interaction via camera or cell phone, we encourage you to do so.
The Lionel Lakes Police Department is committed to keeping you safe while you are on the road, as well as preventing crime through traffic law enforcement. If you have any questions regarding traffic stops or any other matters pertaining to the police department, please contact us at 651-982-2300. Thank you for watching this video.
We all know that there are personal and societal costs to traffic enforcement. I've heard all too often from community, don't cops have anything better to do? When I see cops today, I don't feel like I'm protected. I'm thinking, oh shoot, are they going to pull me over? Are they going to stop me? Some have even said, I do not feel safe around cops. Race-based traffic stops turn one of the most ordinary and probably quintessentially American activities into an experience fraught with danger and risk for people of color. Because traffic stops can happen anywhere and anytime, millions of African Americans and Latinos alter their driving habits in ways that would never occur to most white Americans. Some completely avoid places like all white suburbs, where they feel police harassment for looking out of place. Perhaps the personal cost exacted by racially biased traffic stops is clearest in the instructions given by minority parents to their children on how to behave if they are stopped by the police. This is regardless of economic background, geographic region. My dad, he was a Cook County deputy sheriff, that's Chicago, not Cook County here in Minnesota, gave me the talk 50 years ago. He knew then, as I know, that just having been in a traffic stop can lead to physical and sometimes even deadly confrontations. Karen, a social worker, once said that when her young son began to drive, she knew what she'd tell him. Police are supposed to be there to protect and serve, but you being black and being male, you've got 2 strikes against you. Keep your hands on the steering wheel and do not run, because they will shoot you in the back. Let them do whatever they want to. I know it's humiliating, but let them do whatever they want to do to make sure you get out of that situation alive. Deal with your emotions later. Your emotions are going to come second or last. Christopher Darden, an African-American prosecutor for the O.J. Simpson case, said that to survive traffic stops, he learned that the rules of the game were don't move, don't turn around, don't give some rookie an excuse to shoot you. The perspective of Mr. Darden, who spent 14 years working closely with police to prosecute accused criminals, is not unique. And for people of color, it continues to be reinforced by far too many real-life experiences. Think of Philando Castile. Think more recently of Daunte Wright. Please watch the following video that will help explain the talk that black families have been having with their children about police stops.
In many black and brown families, it is common for parents to have the talk with their sons and daughters very early, at an early age, about what to do if they are ever pulled over by police. It's a conversation that we're having right here, right now this morning, as two separate incidents involving police encounters and traffic stops are now dominating the headlines.
I didn't do anything. Back up. Whoa, hold on. Daniel. What's going on? Hold on.
All you gotta do is listen.
It's video that may be triggering and disturbing for some people. One showing a black and Latino Army officer pepper sprayed and arrested in Virginia last year. And another showing the moments a black man was killed in Minnesota just this week. Both incidents happening during traffic stops in America.
We have to educate, train.
Jackie Carter with the Alliance for Safe Traffic Stops says it's important for people to know their rights if they're pulled over by police.
You have the right to ask why you're being detained or stopped. You have, the right to get the badge number, and you have the right to file a complaint.
Adding to that, if you're stopped while driving, police must have probable cause, meaning a strong, unbiased, and factual reason for believing there was a traffic violation. That's according to the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under law. The organization says police may ask for your license, registration, and proof of insurance, and if they see anything illegal, it may create probable cause for them to search your car. Carter says when analyzing the video of this incident in Virginia,
I understand completely how the motorist wanted to go to a well-lit area. I think that was very smart of him. And I also think that, putting his hands up where they could be seen was very smart. But we also have to understand that the law is that if an officer requires you to get out of your vehicle, you must do so.
She says when asked to pull over, it's important to stop when safe and turn off your car engine and keep your hands visible. The Lawyers Committee says do not consent to a search of your car or personal belongings or reach for any items on you or in your car without specific instructions from police.
Yeah, and that's why Jackie Carter created the Don't Reach tool. It's a little pouch that would go either on your driver's side vent or on the visor above your head. It would hold all the documents that police would need during a traffic stop. The idea is to help prevent you from digging in your pocket or going in your glove box to help make police, I guess, feel more comfortable in those situations. But she says that it's also important for training to happen for us as the public to know what to do during a traffic stop and to know our rights, but also for police to take accountability in knowing how they can help de-escalate these situations and also be aware of the bias that we've seen happen over the years during incidents like these.
I hope you enjoyed the video on knowing your rights. What are you required to do during a traffic stop? It's a video I think that really does explain both the feelings and the thought process that black families have had for a number of years. Widespread driving while black practices deeply undermine the legitimacy and therefore the effectiveness of the criminal justice system. At the same time that the issue of racial profiling by law enforcement was expanding, the United States Supreme Court ruled on the constitutionality of pretextual traffic stops. Using a minor traffic infraction as an excuse to stop and search a vehicle is the definition of a pretextual stop. And the U.S. Supreme Court in 1996, in a case called Wren versus U.S., codified that it was legal. In practice, we all know every driver probably violates some provision of the vehicle code at some time during even a short drive. Because state traffic codes identify so many different infractions, the legislature has decided what laws should be on the books for traffic safety. And that goes right down to even vehicle equipment, which is regulated. A small light bulb must illuminate the rear license plate, or tail lights must be visible from a particular distance. Tire tread must be at a particular depth, and all the equipment must be in working order at all times. Pretextual traffic stops fuel the belief that the police are not only unfair and biased, but that they're untruthful as well. Each pretextual traffic stop involves an untruth, and both the officer and the driver recognize this. The alleged traffic infraction is not the real reason why the officer has stopped the driver. This becomes obvious when the officer asks the driver whether he is carrying drugs or guns, or whether he seeks consent to search the car. If the stop was really about enforcement of the traffic code, there'd be no need for a search. And stopping a driver for a traffic offense when the real officer's real purpose is drug interdiction or gun interdiction is, frankly, it's a lie. It's a legally sanctioned lie, to be sure, but a lie nonetheless. What happens when law enforcement embraces a tactic that is based on the systematic and fairly transparent deception of an overwhelmingly innocent people? Pretext stops capture some who are guilty. That is absolutely the case. And many say it has an unacceptably high societal cost. The practice undermines public confidence in the law enforcement and erodes the legitimacy of the criminal justice system and makes police work that much more difficult and, frankly, that much more dangerous. That the courts did this decision, or made this decision, as they saw that motor vehicles were becoming the means to commit crimes, such as fleeing from a robbery or hiding guns and drugs, doesn't change the dynamics of whether or not we feel that it is a legitimate practice. And there are many today who are calling that into question. Today, as we think of the rash of carjackings and drive-by shootings, it's not hard to see why the courts ruled that a car, because it is mobile, required different rules. Think of how you would feel if the traffic stop was intended to take a young gang member who has a gun off the street. Does that change your view of whether the stop is legitimate, lawful, and proper? What would you think if the stop was meant to locate a person suspected in beating his wife and her children? What if the stop was to recover a car with a missing pet, or to stop a possible drunk driver? Today we find ourselves at a crossroads. We all want to be safe, both from crashes and from crime. We want to feel respected and to trust our peace officers to be fair and humane. Traffic enforcement is one place where these values cross. I want to thank Interfaith and all of the faith communities who've come together as we have this conversation about the beloved community. As we close, I want you to ask yourself how, as a community, we can come together as peacemakers and peacekeepers. Thank you.
Commissioner Harrington, any additional thoughts you'd like to share?
I will just say that what we loaded in there is several different values. The values of safety versus the value of security. The value of respect versus the value of what some would say is the effectiveness of using the lie of pretext stops. I hope that as you're discussing this dilemma, you will think about that car that's been driving around in a high school area that might be stolen, and how the officer might view that individual. I also hope you think about how that young person who's driving that car may see local police in light of Daunte Wright and Philandro Castile and other high-profile activities that we've seen here and nationally. And so I invite your good counsel and your wisdom to help enlighten us about where we should be going as we try to keep the peace.
We've got a couple moments before we post our first Mentimeter. If folks would like to use the reaction button located on the bottom of their Zoom toolbar to raise their hand, if they would like to share anything, their initial reaction to the dilemma. The initial question we're going to ask is, what values are in conflict here? The initial ending question of the dilemma was, what should Officer Johnson do next? I'm going to lay those two questions out for a moment. Again, use that reaction bar or button to raise your hand so that you come to the top of my screen, if you don't mind. And then we'll jump to the Mentimeter question, and everyone can participate in that. Steve, you want to unmute?
So Chief Harrington, thanks for that video. I was just thinking about how we'll use that at St. John's in our parish to really kind of put this dilemma forth. I'm not a police officer, and so I don't know the answer to this question, which is why I'm asking it. What does the post standard say about an officer who's alone, who sees the passenger door open on the other side? When does that situation turn into a situation where they might need to defend themselves?
Steve, a great question. And I'm not sure that the Post has the answer to that, but sort of standard operating procedure for most police departments, if you're working by yourself, is that a sister squad is listening on the radio and then would join you on the traffic stop. What makes that tricky is that the sister squad may not show up until several minutes after the stop has been initiated. And so the officer is going to have to make a decision. Do they stay with the car and with the driver? If the person opens that door and is in a hostile manner, do they back up to their squad car and take a defensive position there? So there are a variety of options in terms of what their next steps could be. And having personally been there, you have to make a quick choice. Do I stay with the car and the driver, or do I chase the person who's running from the car? Or do I see a gun and do I now drop back and point a gun at a car full of kids where only one of them may in fact may really be the threat?
I'm remembering a situation many years ago when I first moved to Minnesota about an Officer Guthrie. I don't know if you recall that, but he was killed in a traffic stop. And it was widely covered by the Strib and other papers. And I'm guessing that's
it is one of the more dangerous cases that officers have been engaged in, and it has been one of the things that they've trained a lot about as to how do you make a traffic stop safely. And if you look at the video, you'll see even a few of the tactics. Where the officer's hand is in relation to their gun as they walk up. The lights to keep the person from able to see the position of the officer. Even just checking the doors to see if they're locked and checking the trunk to make sure that no one's going to pop up on them.
Thanks.
Glenn, you can unmute yourself. There you go.
Took about 3 clicks, but it finally unmuted.
It's all good.
Just, I guess, kind of a comment related to the question, I guess, that Steve just asked is, listening to that dilemma, and it just feels it's disturbing to me that officers patrol alone. I'm old enough, I guess, to remember, I feel like when I was a kid, the standard procedure was that there was always 2 officers in a patrol car, and maybe that was just my perception from watching Adam 12 or things like that. But it seems like somewhere along the way, the standard went from, 2 officers to often 1 officer. And given the nature of the job, that just feels like such a huge risk to the officer, being alone, often in dangerous situations, not being able to wait necessarily for us, like I think you called it a sister squad to come. And then on the other side too, I think it, potentially can invite legalities of if that officer acts inappropriately, and, we saw in the video person calling on their cell phone, the badge number and things like that. But it, to not have a second person there to kind of corroborate things or help control situations, it just strikes me as such a difficult policy to have single officers. And I assume that that's probably a function of budget. And I guess if there is any information on, is this a change that happened in 1980 or whatever, where we've gone from 2 to 1? That's a question, I guess, in terms of that logistics of it. But otherwise, I just wanted to register my kind of feeling about that, feeling like such a dangerous situation in so many ways.
And you've identified pretty much the epoch when it happened. Is I remember in St. Paul, historically, St. Paul had operated with a 2-officer squad model. And then in the 1980s, as volume of calls and number of dispatched units increased, the chief went to what we call solo squads, or one person squads, or one man squads, I think was the term back in those days. And what the statistics showed was that they were not any more likely to be injured than the 2-officer squads were, which justified why in many departments they have maintained that 1 officer with a sister squad to provide backup. And then there are other departments which have always operated that way. State Patrol, as far as I can tell, has been in 1-officer squads for state highway patrol for as long as anybody can remember. But I'm sure that has changed, and you're right about so many of those things. You know, the body cams and the dash cams and things along that lines have added that extra set of eyes and ears to see what's going on. Radio dispatch has become our lifeline to say, I need more help here. But one of the challenges that we're talking about every day in public safety is with the decrease in the number of officers. And there's, I think, here locally, I think we're talking anywhere from a 10 to 20% drop in officers, depending on the department. And some, like Minneapolis, have had much more dramatic. The number of squads that are working at any given time is dropped, and therefore the availability of backup. Or do you have, you're making a question tactically, how thin do I want to spread out my officers, knowing that I need them to be in rapid response mode and able to get to a lot of different calls, versus how safe can I, how much safety can I guarantee by putting an extra officer in that car?
Wonderful. I've got 2 hands up, and then we're going to move to our Mentimeter question. So Rabbi Reuven.
Hi, really good to be here. I have just a kind of a quick comment, and then a question. The comment is just, it seems to me that attention embedded in this incident, or this scenario, is between a kind of abstraction, which is the presumption of innocence, which is, of course, an incredibly important thing, and then the information that the officer is dealing with in the moment, both coming in on the computer and just seeing with her own eyes, right? And that the kind of concrete potential danger runs up against the important principle of presumption of innocence. That just seems like a tough one to me. The question is, it would seem to me that everything, the obvious point, everything gets much more dangerous and much more serious once a gun is drawn, by the officer. And I'm just wondering what the procedure is, like, how does the police officer know, okay, at this point, I actually need to draw my weapon? And is that fuzzy? Is it pretty clear what the regulations are on that? I'm just curious in this case how that might be thought about.
It is fuzzy, to be clear, because every department has its own sets of practices and procedures, and some departments are incredibly strict about it. And these days, even the technology is different. So for example, as State Patrol is moving into body cams, one of the pieces of that we have purchased is that if you draw your gun, it automatically turns on your body cam, because we feel that even the drawing of the gun, even if you're not firing it, is a significant use of force and therefore needs to be documented. But it is left to the discretion of the officer as to, do they feel the circumstances put them under threat? And so when I worked midnights and you walked into a burglary in progress where the building door was open, or where you made a traffic stop in a deserted area where there were multiple people in the car, you oftentimes walked up with your hand on your gun, but you typically, for me, didn't draw the gun at that point. Other officers I know who felt under greater threat, and this becomes part of that, what is a threat and how is the perception of threat? How does that work through the lens of race and a variety of other factors that are personal to the officer? So there are studies, Harvard's done a really nice piece on looking at the biases that we have based on race and based on gender, that you see a person, you see a flash of that person, do you perceive that person as a threat? And race is absolutely one of the things that the Harvard studies of implicit bias has shown factors into that. And so when you factor that in, and the fact that the officer has the discretion to pull a weapon because they feel threatened, that's where the whole issue of implicit bias and trying to work through that with police officers and peace officers, I think, is so important to both the character of the officers we hire and the training that we provide them.
Okay, we've got time for one more question, Bridget, and then we're going to move on to our Mentimeter question. Hold on one second, Bridget. Linda and Sarah, if you want to put your question in the chat, I will get it copied and put into an email for Commissioner Harrington.
Thank you. Commissioner Harrington, is there anything that would have precluded Officer Johnson for waiting for backup before she approached the car? Once she got the information it was potentially a stolen car, and that she knew that there were more people in the car than, I mean, she was clearly outnumbered?
No, there'd be nothing to preclude her from that. In some departments, that would have been the procedure. It is a judgment call at that point as to whether or not you feel that, the time of the day and what your own history is. Do you feel safe walking up on that car, thinking that it might be stolen? And there's, I will tell you, there are probably officers who would see that and go, I don't know that it's stolen because it's just the fact that it has no rear plate. Okay, I got some information. Do I want to do a felony traffic stop and pull a bunch of teenage kids out at gunpoint, which would be the felony traffic stop, versus do I just want to walk up and see what I've got and make my own judgment when I get more information? So, but there is nothing that would have stopped her from acting on this as a felony car stop once it was even a possible stolen car.
Well, so is by calling for backup, does that automatically make it a felony traffic stop?
No, it does not.
Okay.
Thank you, Bridget. We're going to use a little tool. Thank you, Linda and Sarah. We are going to use a tool called Mentimeter. You received a link and it's now in the chat. Our evaluation team is going to share the screen right now. If you can click the link in the chat and go to Mentimeter, this question will be on the screen and you can start entering your answer and it'll populate on the shared screen. So click the link in the chat. It'll open up a new window outside of Zoom and you can enter in your answers into that screen right there. If you are looking for the code is, and I'll type the code in the chat here, 71540912. So we're going to take just a moment to see our group's answers to this question. What values do you see in conflict with each other in the dilemma? And this gives us a chance to allow this data to be kept and shared with our evaluation team for further use. And then we're going to go into our text study. So we're just going to take about a minute. If the Mentimeter doesn't work for you, please feel free to put your answer in the chat box. And I'll put the question in it too. Don't be shy. You can be the first one to put your answer in. Can everyone see the Mentimeter as well? It's a new technology. So of enforcing the law while being safe, safety for both officer, driver, passenger versus enforcement of law, presumption of innocence, potential threat to police officer if the car is actually stolen vehicle, safety of officer, oh, they're moving, of officer versus ascertaining whether the car is stolen, safety of community and individuals, enforcing law, safety of, oh, you all can see them as well. I'm not going to stop reading them here for a second. We'll be able to share this with you as well afterwards. This is all great information. I'm going to pass the screen share and the leadership back over to Professor Earl Schwartz, and he is going to lead us in our text study. And we're going to look at a sacred text and then revisit this dilemma after our text study and answer a couple more questions in the Mentimeter. So Earl, it is your screen.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you for such thoughtful responses already, everyone. Our purpose in doing sacred text study as part of our conversations is to expand the range of experience and judgment, insight, and inspiration available to us, to draw on voices from our sacred traditions in our conversations in our respective congregations, and we entrust you with the choice of which sources from your tradition or others you might choose. But our hope is that in listening and pondering the underlying premises and unifying resonances that draw these voices together in our traditions, we can then weigh our own thinking on their scales. And here I would add that as we do, we're not only accessing sacred traditions of authority, but engaging in intercultural dialogue within our own respective religious cultures to the extent that we have long histories. Our traditional texts, when they come from very different times and places, can present intercultural challenges and opportunities from within. And that's an asset. And so as we turn to one such text as an example, I would ask that we not only keep in mind the authority of these texts in our respective communities, but also the opportunity they can give us to look again from an angle we might not otherwise have considered. The demonstration text I've chosen for us today comes from the Jewish version of the source books that you've been provided. It's a short passage from Moses Maimonides' Code of Normative Practice, his Mishneh Torah. Maimonides wrote this passage just about 1,000 years ago, and doing the final edits in the vicinity of greater metropolitan Cairo, codifying earlier biblical and rabbinic sources having to do, in the case of the text I've chosen, specifically with robbery, public safety, and arrest. And before we look at the text, I'd only add in this regard that over the course of his lifetime, Maimonides had extensive, relevant personal experience. He was, in the current Arabic by which he would have been referred, understood to be a mufti. That is a judicial decisor and advisor, although not necessarily a court judge. And for a period of time, he served as Rais al-Yahud, Rosh HaYehudim, the head of the Jewish community in the court of Saladin. So you can conclude that though Maimonides, you could say, had an apartment in the rabbinic ivory tower, unlike many a Jewish scholar, his legal opinions on a given topic could well have very concrete and far-reaching implications and draw upon deep and rich personal experience. And with that, let's look at the text. It comes from his code dealing specifically with theft. It begins with a case in which, if it is clear to a householder that this particular thief, who the householder has encountered, has confronted, is not going to kill him and is only there for material gain, that the sole purpose of the thief is the theft. It is forbidden to kill the person. And if the householder does kill that person, that constitutes criminal homicide on the part of the householder. And then perhaps a little closer to our case, likewise, someone who has come and gone, or is discovered breaking in before having stolen anything, and turns and runs away, does not constitute a violent pursuer, a potential assailant. And that person has every right to life. And if surrounded by people or witnesses, even if still on the householder's property, they are not to be killed. And then Maimonides says, needless to add, if they come to court, they are not to be killed. Now, because our time is short this morning, I would only ask about the process of looking at such a text. What might it introduce into the conversation in a congregation that could otherwise be easily overlooked? Or perhaps just a bit more specifically, and then perhaps a couple of responses from you. Do you see any premises that Maimonides is working from in this passage that it would be helpful to explore together in a conversation, because they would likely be overlooked if not considered in this context? Does he say anything that suggests that he's starting from premises that it would be important to be sure are considered, and therefore we can thank Maimonides for raising them? Any thoughts about that? Any quick responses?
We do have one hand up, BC Franson.
Yes.
I think that what I see there is that too often we look at that as though we are the owner of the thing that is being stolen, as opposed to looking at it as we are the thief. And if we would look at it as we are the thief, we can easily then understand why our life is valuable and more valuable than the thing we are stealing.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that deeply. And I would only add to that it looks like in that regard, Maimonides begins from the assumption thievery is a crime, but the consequence of a theft should never be anyone's death, neither the death of the person who initially claimed the property, nor for that matter, the death of the thief. If it's only about things, then all lives are of ultimate value. Any other
Earl?
quick thoughts? Yes.
Yeah, Earl, we do have time for 10 minutes of breakout rooms and we have them set up. So do you want to pose a question and have folks go into breakout?
I think, thanks, Sarah. I think I would simply invite participants to continue the conversation, not only about the particulars Maimonides lays out for practice, but any underlying assumptions that he seems to be making, like the sort we've just mentioned, that would be valuable to keep in mind if they aren't already raised by the participants in your discussion groups from their own experience or judgment. Does he add something of value to the conversation?
Wonderful. My colleague Phil will be opening the breakout rooms here in just a moment. And we're just going to spend 8 to 10 minutes in that breakout room. Introduce yourselves, have a conversation about the text Earl presented. And then we'll come back together and just talk a little bit. Yes, I can put the text in the chat. Let me do that before we go into breakout rooms. The Hebrew might not translate. I'll try to do the whole thing here. Hold on one moment. Thank you. And hold on one second. I got to pull it up from my Word. Our Charmaine from our group, our team of evaluators, put in a Google Doc. And please, one person who takes notes, please click on that from your group number. Sorry, I'm stumbling here because I didn't have the Word doc open for the text, just the PDF. We'd like to have you take just some brief notes about it today, and then you can share it back on that Google page. If you can't get that Google link to work, just take some notes and you can email it directly to myself.
And Sarah, as we go to the groups, I would hope that this helps us to consider the ways in which sources drawn from our own traditions, each of our traditions, might in fact not only be illuminating for what they say explicitly, but for what they help us to understand implicitly about the frame of mind that leads to the text.
Exactly. I will jump from room to room to make sure you have the text of that Earl shared as well. So open up those rooms, please. Leadership team, you are in one room together. And I just found out that we'll be able, the Mentimeter will be downloaded into a PDF and we'll email that out to you guys as well.
And second question is, I've been wondering about exactly how we would manage the discussions in our faith communities prior to reviewing the faith community reading that we use. And is it the idea that we would use a question like you had in the Mentimeter, that it would be asking people to discuss the competing values they see? Or would we be asking people first, what should Officer Johnson do? That sort of very specific focused question, then go to the faith reading and then see if they've changed their mind on what Officer Johnson should do. Those are very different kinds of responses. I liked the first one. It was thinking about in terms of competing values was very challenging. And but I just wonder how we actually handle the discussion, the specific discussion with our people in our congregations.
Yeah. I'm gonna answer it very quickly and then we'll talk about it in depth at the end. It's a both and. So we want you to, you'll get a PDF emailed to you with the dilemma story and the discussion questions at the bottom of it. So we'll lay it out with ask this question, have the story, ask this question, have your text study, ask this question. So everyone who is on the leadership call and your learning coordinators will get that PDF emailed to you specifically. We're gonna tidy it up and send it out to you this week. But we're gonna now focus a little bit back onto the tech study. I've built in enough time to do questions at the end as well about procedure and how this is gonna look in your faith community. So I'm gonna turn it over to Charmaine to ask our next Mentimeter question. And that question is, in what ways did your viewpoint change after your tech study? Or if it didn't change, you can share that as well. It should be on the same link. You just click the next slide at the top of the page. And she shared the link again in the chat for you. So feel free to answer that question. In what ways did your viewpoint change after your tech study? Or maybe it didn't change after this tech study. And we know that not all of you are in the Jewish faith tradition on this call, but hopefully the conversation was rich and you can share your thoughts as well. So we'll give that just about a couple seconds here. And if you want to, you can feel free to share it in the chat as well. It looks like we've got one. There we go. Okay. Oh, I love it. Love it. Thank you. Oh, there we got the code again. And we'll download these for you as well and share that with you too. Human life is more valuable than property. Affirmed my viewpoint. Wonderful. I like that, but our scenario is not clear. And the text says if it is clear, but the scenario is not necessarily clear. The dilemma is a dilemma for a reason. Wonderful. This is all great. Charmaine, when you think we've seen them all, we can go to that next question. The puppy is considered property. Yeah. Okay. We got a couple people in the chat. There we go. And as far as when you're using different ways to record your congregational conversations, we'll send you there's going to be a Google form link on our project webpage where you can input your information. We're using Mentimeter with you all because it's just one way to manage the group. You do not need to use Mentimeter with your group. So we're going to go to the next slide. And the next question is, what values would you prioritize in this situation after engaging in the tech study? So we're looking for values. What values would you engage? And if this question's not on your screen up top, you can click next slide. We're looking for values here. There we go. Human life. Oh. Safety. De-escalation. Life over stuff. A good reminder. Just a couple more seconds to put your answer in there. Again, we'll download these and share these with you. You'll get a probably long email from myself or Phil tomorrow with all of the resources today. Yes. And we've got some in the chat as well here. Value of human life. Don't take away what you didn't create. Oh, I like that too. Wonderful. Wonderful. So again, Earl, do you want to say anything else to wrap up this text study? We've got a couple minutes here.
Only that I'm very moved by the responses. I hope that Maimonides' voice enriched and expand our conversations. I think that in terms of sequencing of your conversations in your congregations, it's useful to start simply with the question at the end of the dilemma, what should Officer Johnson do? Then followed by a conversation about why, which then opens up the door to whys are about values. What happens when you apply your values to the whys you've stated? I would only suggest that. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Earl. It's always wonderful to learn from you and learn with you. I appreciate that so much. I am going to take the last couple minutes to show you a resource. I'm going to share my screen one more time to show you a resource that is available to you all. It is our Building the Beloved Community Public Safety webpage that is available at interfaithaction.org under the Get Involved tab. And on this page, it's under the Get Involved tab here under Clergy Civic Engagement. This picture was a long, long time ago when we could all get together and sit at a table. But if you scroll down, we have our project toolkit here, our intro session video from November, some FAQs from the project, our PowerPoint, just some job descriptions for folks if you're still recruiting some volunteers to help you, a bulletin, I'll call it a blurb that you can use to help recruit folks to join you. We created 2 little graphics that brought together Department of Public Safety's logo and ours. If you'd like to use those, you right click and save on that. Over here to the left, we've got 3 of our finished curricula source books, and we have some still in process, a UU guidebook, a Muslim guidebook, and an American Indian Indigenous Spiritual guidebook are still in process. Our January video that we just saw today is here as well for you. We'll be uploading this video to this website along with cutting out the dilemma story as well. That'll be uploaded here. This is also where you'll find resources that will put anything that we get from Commissioner Harrington's office or that we create for you as well. We'll link it and post it on this website. We still have our November introductory session on here as well. So I wanted to share that with you all, that this is kind of your go-to page. My contact information's up here if you need it as well. Again, interfaithaction.org under Get Involved, Building the Beloved Community. We'll again send that link out to you this week as well with a wrap up of today. As Earl had mentioned, the formula of these conversations in your houses of worship, similar to what we did today, sharing the dilemma story and asking that first question of what should Officer Johnson do and why, having that values conversation. It'll be again laid out in a PDF for you, asking the questions we asked via Mentimeter. The one thing I forgot to say, on that website will also be a Google form for your learning coordinator or your facilitator, whoever is going to record your conversation, to upload your notes. And that will help give us all of the data we need to put together something for Commissioner Harrington that is useful. So that's the most important part, is that when you have these conversations back in your congregations, your synagogues, temples, mosques, that you bring that back to us. And so we have that information to share with our evaluators. So this process of talking about it, several different times after a before and after tech study is the process. We ask that you hold between now and March, when we get together on March 22nd for our second worship or working session, not worship session, working session. I want to open it up for questions. You can use that hand button. You can, and as Phil just put in there, Sarah, if Phil and I are here to support you, email us, call us, let us know what you need from us as well. Patrice, you've got a question.
And it's a question about the reporting.
Yeah.
Is the Google Doc just a narrative space to write down what happened, or do you have specific sorts of questions that you are going to want us to answer? I'm thinking about this in terms of what the person who is doing the reporting should be keeping track of.
So we would like it's going to just have a place for you to upload a digital file. So a Word doc, a PDF, you can upload that. We're going to ask for your name, your congregation's name, your contact email address. So if our evaluators have a question, they can reach back out to you, and then you can upload that document. The questions on the dilemma sheet that you will receive this week are the questions that we'd like you to answer. If you would like to, if you ask any additional questions, we just ask that you tell us what additional questions you ask or what comes up in that conversation. So if you have someone who has a laptop or a tablet, that just kind of takes notes as it is. We don't need identifying markers. We don't need to say that Phil said this and Randy said this and John said this and Nicole said that. Like, we don't need to know that much. We just need to know that these are the things that were said. I'm going to ask Charmaine for any clarifications on that. She's not on my screen right now.
The only thing I'll say is that the Google form where you'll upload your notes doc will have a couple of questions about how many people participated in the session, which session it was. So we're just finalizing what questions we want those, just so that we know kind of how many people are doing this and from what faith tradition. But other than that, we're going to try to keep it as simple as possible.
And we hope to have that up by the end of the week on that website for you. So you can look at it beforehand. You don't have to be surprised by anything. And Mary, and then I'll go to Harold and Bob in the chat.
I'm curious about if I'm understanding this correctly, as we bring people together in the session to set the expectation that the importance of setting the expectation that this is a conversation. We're not here to drive to a solution, because a lot of us are in this mindset that we're going to solve this problem. Perhaps sometimes people come to conversations like that. And so it really is that flow of information from different perspectives that we're trying to capture. Am I tracking that correctly?
You are tracking that correctly. Yep. Yep. Commissioner Harrington will receive a curated piece from our evaluation team at the end of this. And it is what we are giving to him. Commissioner Harrington, speaking of yourself, I have a question from Harold Rabbi Kravitz in the chat, and he would like to know a little bit more about how this group after these 6 sessions that we're having will be distilled and delivered to police agencies, or how you will use it within your work.
I'd say there's 3 different vehicles here. One, the Department of Public Safety through the BCA does police training throughout the state of Minnesota. And so this will enlighten the training that Tom Smith and the BCA provides to police departments on character-based hiring and on police procedure and on tactical training. So it will enlighten those trainings. In addition to that, because I'm connected with higher ed at most of the universities that provide police training for new recruits, this will also be provided to the post directors of the law enforcement programs so that they understand sort of the values base they're in. In a more practical or more direct bet, though, I'll be having conversations with the chairs of the criminal justice and policy committees from both the House and the Senate. And quite frankly, one of those topics will be about traffic stops. And so your information will enlighten those conversations with Senator Limmer and Representative Mariani and their committees, because I think we all want to make sure that all the voices are being heard. So I'm looking forward to being able to have a much more robust conversation there. And then finally, because the State Patrol is under the Department of Public Safety, and because they are one of the leading voices on traffic enforcement, they're right now working on some advanced research with the University of Minnesota and other national agencies through the IACP about traffic stops. And I'm hoping that what you give me here, even what I've gotten today, will help enlighten Colonel Langer's conversations nationally about the importance of traffic stops in terms of traffic safety, but also how do we do those safely so that both the officer's safety and the citizen's safety are kept highly in mind. I will close with one last quick comment. That the comment that what I heard today validates 2 years worth of work on the Deadly Force Encounters Working Group, where we kept hammering on the value of life, the sanctity of life as being a primary value that drove public policy as we were creating the police reform bill and their acts thereof. I'm hoping that this will give me the kind of understanding that helps us build the next level of research and policy so that we can, in fact, not just talk about a beloved community, but actually start implementing some of this.
Thank you, Commissioner Harrington. I'm going to jump. We've got two just wrap up questions because I'm watching the time. I want to jump quickly to our last two Mentimeter questions. These are quick, pick a decision, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So Charmaine, if you can share your screen. And then I'm willing to stay on a little bit longer to answer any more questions, but I want to be cognizant of 90 minutes of your time together. So jump on that Mentimeter. The first question, to what extent did the scenario in session deepen your understanding of the challenges of public safety policies and practices? Awesome. Grab an answer there. The link's in the chat. We're going to leave it up for just another second. Actually, while this is up, John, why don't you ask me your question? We'll multitask today.
Okay, it was just I listening to Commissioner Harrington, I couldn't write fast enough, and there's an overview, a sentence or two, maybe a paragraph in the materials that captures what he says. But I would love to get some more of that detail that we can give to our congregation. You know, he talked about relationship with colleges and universities that do training. It was a very detailed explanation of how valuable this will be and how it will be used. I'd love to get some more of that detail.
I can get you that from when I start editing this video.
Great.
I can pull that together and run it past Commissioner Harrington folks.
Great.
And we'll put that in the packet. So let's go to the next question. There we go. How much do you agree or disagree faith-based values can inform public safety decisions and actions? You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 choices. Strongly agree all the way to strongly disagree. And we'll transcribe what Commissioner Harrington said because I can pull that out from the Zoom. So we'll get that too as well. Awesome, wonderful. Great answers. Well, faith leaders, colleagues, friends, we just want to thank you all for being with us today. Again, watch for some information from Phil or I this week, a recording of this, the information on the dilemma. And someone asked in the chat if we're still recruiting faith communities to be a part of this. Yes, we are. The only caveat is we want them to be in Minnesota, and they can be from anywhere in the state. This is all on Zoom. We have folks from all over Minnesota joining us today. So talk to Phil or I, reach out to us, and we'd love to have more folks join us in March. Folks will be able to do this session with their people now too as well. So Commissioner Harrington or Randy, any closing thoughts?
I'll throw it to the commissioner in a second. I just want to say it's fabulous to be in this conversation with you. Seeing the results about how the conversation helped deepen your thinking is just, it says that faith can be real in our lives and influence how we think about real life situations. And that is why we're all here. So thanks so much. thanks so much to the commissioner. You know, not many commissioners statewide are turning to their faith communities for input into these discussions. And I think we have an incredible gift here in Commissioner Harrington, and I'm sure you all join me in expressing how grateful we are for this opportunity. And I just want to amplify something that's been in the chats and Sarah just mentioned, which is we'd love to have more faith communities in before the next session. And we'll have a pathway for them to onboard, even though they weren't with us today. So please reach out. Commissioner Harrington, the last word is yours.
I will close by saying thank you. I think that's probably the most appropriate sentiment. Thank you to Interfaith. Thank you to Sarah and Earl and you and all of the congregations that have joined in this conversation. I think that's, I am incredibly grateful for your wisdom. I recognize that that wisdom does not come simply with age, but it comes from the body. And this is the body of the faithful. And I just really am so incredibly grateful for your willingness to spend your time and your wisdom with me as we try and move the beloved community from a word on a page into action.
Wonderful. Thank you all, and look for more communications. Have a wonderful day and stay warm.